Imagine standing in front of a stone giant stretching across the Spanish sky, its arches rising almost 30 meters above the ground, a structure so massive and elegant that it looks like it could have been built yesterday. But here's the twist. It wasn't built yesterday, not even a few centuries ago. It was built nearly 2,000 years ago by the Romans. This is the Aqueduct of Segovia, one of the most astonishing engineering marvels of the ancient world. And the most incredible part? It's still here. Still standing, still dominating the city, still reminding us of a time when human determination and ingenuity could shape entire landscapes. But let me ask you something. How do you build a structure that tall, that long, with no cement holding it together, and still make it last for almost 2 millennia? How did the Romans, without modern machines, lasers, or even steel reinforcement, manage to design something so precise that even today, experts marvel at its perfection? The Aqueduct of Segovia is not just an aqueduct. It's a time machine. Every stone you see was carefully cut, transported, and placed by human hands nearly 20 centuries ago. Every arch was designed to serve one single vital purpose, to bring life-giving water to a growing Roman settlement. And yet, what the Romans built turned out to be far more than a water supply. It became a symbol of power, resilience, and the extraordinary vision of an empire that stretched across 3 continents. Now, if you've ever walked through Segovia, you know that the aqueduct doesn't just blend into the city, it defines it. Picture yourself standing in the Plaza del Azoguejo, the main square, where the aqueduct towers above you like a massive stone cathedral. Tourists stare upward in disbelief. Locals pass by casually, as if this monumental Roman legacy were just another streetlight. But once you stand beneath it, once you see its double row of arches climbing into the sky, you realize this isn't just architecture. This is history carved into stone. But here's the real question. How did it actually work? How did the Romans turn a simple mountain stream into a constant flow of fresh water for an entire city? How could they calculate distances and slopes with such precision that the water never stopped flowing, not too fast to overflow, not too slow to stagnate, just perfectly balanced? To answer that, we need to step back in time, to an age when Segovia wasn't the bustling Spanish city we know today, but a small Roman outpost in need of something every human settlement depends on: fresh, reliable water. And to understand why this aqueduct is so legendary, we need to uncover not just the stones and arches, but the story of the people who built it, the empire that dreamed it, and the incredible journey the water itself had to make before arriving in the city. Because what the Romans achieved here wasn't just engineering, it was a statement that said, Rome is here, Rome controls nature itself, and Rome will endure. So buckle up, because in this video we're going to dive deep into the Aqueduct of Segovia. We'll explore its origins, its construction, the genius behind its design, and the secrets that allowed it to survive for almost 2,000 years. By the end, you'll never look at a simple glass of water or at Roman history the same way again. Let's rewind the clock almost 2,000 years. Imagine the Iberian Peninsula in the early centuries of the Roman Empire. Spain, or Hispania as the Romans called it, was one of the jewels of the empire, rich in resources, fertile lands, and strategically vital for controlling the Western Mediterranean. Segovia at that time was not yet the charming medieval city we think of today, with its fairy tale castle and Gothic cathedral. Back then, it was a modest Roman settlement perched on a rocky hill, strategically placed near the Sierra de Guadarrama mountains. But there was one big problem: water. The nearby mountain streams were too far and too unreliable to sustain a growing population. And for Romans, water wasn't just a necessity, it was a cornerstone of civilization. You see, Romans didn't settle for the bare minimum. They didn't just want drinking water. They wanted baths, fountains, irrigation for agriculture, and a steady supply that would support military garrisons and civilian life alike. In their worldview, running water was a mark of Roman superiority, a sign that wherever Rome planted its flag, prosperity would follow. So, sometime around the late 1st century or early 2nd century after Christ, most likely during the reign of Emperor Domitian, or perhaps slightly later under Trajan or Hadrian, the Aqueduct of Segovia was built. Historians still debate the exact date, but one thing is certain. It was the Romans' answer to Segovia's thirst. Now think about this. The water source they chose wasn't next door. It was about 17 kilometers away, in the Frio River. That might not sound like much today, when we can just lay down pipes with bulldozers and modern tools. But in the ancient world, transporting water across that distance, through valleys, uneven terrain, and into a city on a hill, that was nothing short of an audacious challenge. And that's where the genius of Roman engineering comes in. The builders designed a route that combined underground channels, bridges, and finally the monumental arches that still stand today. Every step of the way, gravity did the work. No pumps, no machines, just the careful calculation of slope and angle. But why go to such lengths? Why invest so much effort into one city? The answer is simple. Rome understood that water was power. Providing clean, abundant water didn't just keep people alive, it created loyalty. It turned a settlement into a Roman city, a place where people could live the Roman way of life. Public fountains, baths, and the very symbol of abundance made residents feel the might of the empire in their daily routines. It's important to remember that aqueducts were not just practical, they were political. They stood as stone propaganda, silent but powerful. To the locals, the message was clear. Rome brings prosperity. Rome brings civilization. Rome conquers not only people, but nature itself. And the Aqueduct of Segovia, with its towering arches dominating the skyline, was the ultimate statement. Even today, when you walk through the city, the aqueduct is unavoidable. It commands your attention. Now imagine being a local 2,000 years ago, seeing this structure rise from the ground stone by stone. It must have felt like a miracle, a gift from the gods, or, more accurately, from Rome. What's even more fascinating is that the aqueduct continued to function for centuries. For more than 1,800 years, it carried water into Segovia, long after the Roman Empire had collapsed. Through Visigoths, Moors, medieval kingdoms, and modern Spain, the aqueduct endured, a reminder of the empire that had built it. Think about that for a second. How many things we build today will still be standing 2 millennia from now? How many bridges, highways, or skyscrapers will outlast empires, wars, and time itself? The Aqueduct of Segovia isn't just history, it's living proof of Rome's ambition, carved into stone for eternity. If history tells us when and why the aqueduct was built, engineering tells us how. And trust me, this is the part that will blow your mind. Picture this. More than 20,000 granite blocks, each one weighing hundreds of kilograms, carefully cut, transported, and stacked one over the other. Now here's the detail that leaves modern engineers speechless. There is no mortar holding them together. None. Yes, you heard that right. The entire aqueduct, stretching over 800 meters across Segovia, reaching almost 29 meters high at its tallest point, is built using nothing but gravity, balance, and the sheer precision of Roman engineering. So how did they do it? Let's start with the material. The Romans sourced granite from the nearby Guadarrama Mountains. Granite is incredibly strong, resistant to erosion, and nearly indestructible when cut properly. But working with granite is no easy task, even with modern tools. Imagine trying to shape blocks of one of the hardest stones on earth using only hammers, chisels, and manpower. It was back-breaking work, but the Romans had perfected the art of quarrying and stone cutting. Each block was carved with remarkable precision, so that when stacked, they fit together like pieces of a puzzle. The weight of the stones themselves created stability. And here's the genius. The aqueduct is a series of arches, and arches distribute weight evenly. Instead of collapsing under their own mass, the stones press against each other, locking the structure in place. The more weight you put on an arch, the stronger it becomes as long as it's built correctly. Now let's talk about those arches. The Aqueduct of Segovia has 2 tiers of them. The lower level is made up of larger arches, while the upper level consists of smaller ones stacked directly on top. This design not only made the structure taller, but also more flexible. Think of it as a giant stone skeleton, able to withstand centuries of wind, rain, earthquakes, and even human neglect. And then comes the slope, the subtle incline that allowed water to flow smoothly from the mountains to the city. This might be the most impressive part of all. The aqueduct drops just about 1 meter for every kilometer it travels. Too steep and the water would rush uncontrollably, eroding the channel. Too flat and the water would stagnate. The Romans had no lasers, no digital levels, no GPS. Yet they calculated this slope perfectly using only basic tools like chorobates, a kind of wooden level with water, plumb lines, and sheer mathematical genius. Here's something to think about. If the slope had been off by just a few centimeters, the water wouldn't have reached the city. 2,000 years ago, failure wasn't an option. And somehow, the Romans didn't fail. Transporting the stones was another challenge. Without cranes, bulldozers, or modern trucks, they had to rely on human and animal labor. Oxen pulled carts, workers rolled stones on logs, and teams of men lifted blocks using ropes, pulleys, and wooden scaffolding. Each stone had to be raised and set into place with absolute accuracy. Imagine the coordination it required. Hundreds of workers, all moving in unison, building something that had to be perfect. But perfection was exactly what they achieved. And that's why the Aqueduct of Segovia has stood for nearly 2,000 years. Even during centuries when it was neglected, even through storms and wars, the structure held strong. The granite, the arches, the precision all combined to create something that is as close to eternal as human engineering can get. Now let's pause for a second. Can you think of a building in your city that will still be standing 2,000 years from now? Skyscrapers rust, highways crack, concrete crumbles, and yet here, in Segovia, a structure built without mortar, without steel, without electricity, still rises proudly over the city. Isn't that mind-blowing? The Aqueduct of Segovia isn't just a feat of construction. It's a masterclass in engineering. It proves that human ingenuity doesn't always need technology. Sometimes, all it needs is vision, determination, and the will to defy the impossible. So far, we've seen the history and the engineering behind the Aqueduct of Segovia. But there's one question still lingering. How did it actually work? After all, this wasn't just a pretty monument, it had a purpose. It was built to bring water, and without that, it would have been meaningless. Let's take a journey, following the exact path the water once took. It all began in the mountains, about 17 kilometers away from Segovia, at the Frio River. That was the aqueduct's source, chosen carefully because the river was reliable, clear, and high enough in elevation to allow gravity to do all the work. The Romans knew that water always seeks the lowest point, so if they could capture it at the right height, it would naturally flow downhill toward the city. At the river, they built a small dam and a reservoir. This first stop was essential. It helped regulate the flow, catching the water and allowing dirt and debris to settle before the journey began. Think of it as an ancient water filter, not high-tech, but brilliantly practical. From there, the water entered an underground channel. For much of its 17-kilometer journey, the aqueduct wasn't visible at all. It traveled through covered stone conduits, sometimes cut directly into rock, other times laid out as raised troughs. The reason? Protection. Keeping the water underground reduced evaporation, kept it cool, and prevented contamination. But every aqueduct needs to cross obstacles, valleys, uneven ground, maybe even a small ravine. And that's where the Romans showed their genius. Instead of forcing the water uphill, which would have been impossible without pumps, they built bridges and arcades to keep the channel at just the right slope. And in Segovia, that solution became art. As the water approached the city, it encountered a deep dip in the terrain. To solve it, the Romans built the massive double-arch structure we see today in the Plaza del Azoguejo. At its tallest point, nearly 29 meters high, the aqueduct lifted the channel above the valley so the water could continue its journey uninterrupted until it reached Segovia itself. Now let's imagine the moment when the water finally entered the city. It wasn't just dumped into one big tank. No, the Romans were organized. The water was distributed into cisterns and then funneled into fountains, public baths, and even private homes of wealthier citizens. People could fetch clean water daily, bathe in flowing water, and enjoy something that many villages in the medieval period, centuries later, could only dream of. And here's the detail that really shows Roman brilliance: the slope. From the mountains to Segovia, the aqueduct descends just enough to keep the water flowing gently. Too steep, and the water would rush uncontrollably, eroding the channel. Too flat, and it would stagnate and become unusable. The Romans found the perfect balance. Let me ask you this. Have you ever carried a glass of water across the room and tried not to spill it? You know how hard it is to keep the surface steady. Now imagine carrying that same glass for 17 kilometers, across valleys and hills, without spilling a drop. That's essentially what the Romans achieved here on a massive scale. And they did it so well that the aqueduct functioned for more than 1,800 years. For centuries, the people of Segovia drank, bathed, and lived thanks to this channel of water flowing silently above their heads. In fact, the aqueduct remained in use until the late 19th century. Think about that. A Roman system serving people in modern times. How many of our modern systems will last even a fraction of that long? The functioning of the Aqueduct of Segovia wasn't just about transporting water. It was about control, organization, and vision. It was about turning a simple stream into a lifeline that sustained an entire city for generations. When the Roman Empire finally crumbled in the West during the 5th century after Christ, many of its great monuments fell into ruin. Aqueducts collapsed, roads deteriorated, and baths turned to dust. But in Segovia, the aqueduct endured. For centuries, through invasions, wars, and neglect, the stone giant continued to stand tall, carrying water as if Rome had never fallen. Imagine the Visigoths walking into Segovia after the fall of Rome, seeing the massive arches still delivering water to the city. Imagine the Moors during their rule in Spain, looking at this Roman creation and recognizing its value. The aqueduct survived all of them, not as a ruin, but as a living, working part of the city. Of course, time left its marks. Some stones weathered, parts of the channel needed reinforcement, and during the Middle Ages, sections of the aqueduct were damaged. But here comes the fascinating part. In the 15th century, Queen Isabella of Castile ordered major repairs. Local legend says that the aqueduct was once damaged by Moorish attacks, and Isabella, determined to preserve this Roman treasure, had it restored so it could continue serving Segovia. And it did. Well into the modern era, the aqueduct continued to provide water, functioning for nearly 1,800 years. It wasn't until the late 19th century that it finally stopped being used as Segovia's main water supply. Think about that. A Roman-built water system still working during the Industrial Revolution. But the aqueduct is more than just durability. It's full of curiosities and legends. One of the most famous is the tale of the Devil's Bridge. According to local folklore, a young girl once struck a deal with the devil himself. Tired of carrying water uphill every day, she wished for a solution. The devil offered to build an aqueduct in a single night, but only if he could claim her soul. The girl agreed, but as dawn broke, one last stone was missing from the aqueduct. The devil had failed, and the girl's soul was spared. That missing stone, locals say, is still visible today. Of course, history tells us the Romans built it, but the legend adds a magical layer to the monument's story. And here's another curiosity. Not a single drop of mortar was used in the construction. The aqueduct has stood entirely on the balance of its stones. Engineers today still study it, marveling at the perfection of its geometry and the strength of its arches. Some even argue that this dry construction method helped it survive earthquakes and centuries of wear better than if it had been glued together with ancient cement. So, through history, through legend, and through sheer resilience, the Aqueduct of Segovia became more than just infrastructure. It became a symbol of survival, adapting and enduring while empires, kingdoms, and rulers came and went. Today, the aqueduct is no longer carrying water, but it carries something far more powerful, meaning. For the people of Segovia, it's more than a monument. It's the heart of their city, the image that defines their identity. Walk through Segovia, and you'll see it on souvenirs, postcards, and even the city's coat of arms. For locals, it's a constant reminder that their home is built on layers of history, stretching back to the glory of Rome. For Spain, the aqueduct represents resilience and continuity. Out of all the Roman structures scattered across the Iberian Peninsula, the Aqueduct of Segovia stands among the best preserved, a national treasure recognized by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site. It tells Spaniards that their history is not just medieval castles and Moorish palaces, but also the legacy of an empire that laid the foundations of European civilization. And for the world, the aqueduct is a universal symbol of human ingenuity. It represents what humanity is capable of when vision and determination meet. It's a reminder that some things are built not just for a moment, but for eternity. Think about it. 2,000 years ago, Roman engineers could never have imagined airplanes flying over their arches, cars driving beneath them, or millions of tourists taking selfies with their stones. And yet, here we are. The aqueduct is timeless, connecting the ancient and the modern, the practical and the symbolic. So what can we take away from the Aqueduct of Segovia? First, it shows us the brilliance of Roman engineering, how precision, patience, and vision can create something that lasts far beyond its builders' lifetimes. Second, it reminds us of resilience, how a structure, like a civilization, can endure through storms, wars, and centuries if built on strong foundations. And third, it challenges us. It asks, what are we building today that will still inspire people 2,000 years from now? The Aqueduct of Segovia isn't just a relic. It's a living lesson. A reminder that greatness isn't measured by how long we live, but by what we leave behind. And now, it's your turn. If you enjoyed this journey into the secrets of Segovia's aqueduct, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into history, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. And if you want to keep traveling through the wonders of the ancient world, check out our next video about the most astonishing Roman inventions. You'll be surprised by how many of them still shape your life today. Thank you for joining me on this journey through time. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and remember, history isn't just in books. It's all around us, carved in stone, waiting to be rediscovered. Because we are the ones who remember, the ones who question, the ones who refuse to let history fall silent. And you, are you ready for Rome's next secret?